The Soviet Union denied this ever happened, but the truth is impossible to hide. Today, we're bringing that truth back into the light. Welcome to Ukraine Unfiltered, where we uncover the real stories behind Ukraine's past. Let's travel back to the years 1932-1933 to a man-made famine created by the Soviet regime. An attempt to wipe out Ukraine's entire existence. A tragedy that stole millions of Ukrainian lives and a truth that was hidden from the world for decades. This is the story of the Holodomor. The word Holodomor comes from the Ukrainian words holod, meaning hunger, and morete, meaning to kill. Put them together and you get death by starvation. Not a famine caused by drought, not by failed crops, not by nature, but a famine created and engineered by the Soviet regime, led by Joseph Stalin. A famine used as a weapon against Ukraine and Ukrainians. To understand why Stalin did this, you need to know something important about Ukrainians. Not just in the 1930s, but also the 1,000 years leading up to that point and long after to present day. And that is this: Ukrainians are proud, independent, educated, and they are born with a strong national identity. The Ukrainian language, culture, and the idea of Ukrainian farmers owning their own land was something that terrified the Soviet regime. Why? Because they wanted total control, and Ukraine stood firmly in the way of that. So, Stalin decided he would try to break Ukraine by targeting the people who fed the entire region, the farmers. No food meant no survival, which in his mind meant no more Ukraine. He ordered all of their grain to be taken away. Soldiers went door to door, showing up unannounced, ordering families around, searching every corner of people's homes and tearing them apart. They dumped out people's flour, took every last jar of food a family was saving, and even dug up backyards because they suspected people buried food there to hide in the soil. But what did Stalin do with all of the food he stole from Ukrainians? Much of the grain was exported to Western countries to fund Soviet industrial projects, while the rest was stockpiled in warehouses or used to feed Soviet cities, factory workers, and the Red Army. Some grain even sat rotting in storage, while children in Ukrainian villages died because they had nothing to eat. Stalin had the food, Ukraine needed the food, but he chose to let millions starve to death because the goal was not to feed Ukraine, it was to break it. In some regions of Ukraine, when Soviet brigades found hidden grain or food that villagers managed to hide, they didn't just confiscate it. They publicly burned it as a punishment and intimidation for others who were considering doing the same thing. They also burned crops right in the fields so that it didn't even have a chance to be harvested. The goal was to make sure Ukrainians had absolutely nothing left to survive on, and to terrorize anyone who even considered hiding whatever food they had left. This happened everywhere, to millions of people. And if a village resisted, if anyone in that village even tried to keep so much as a handful of grain, after the Soviets burned the food, the entire village would then be blacklisted. And blacklisted villages had no deliveries, no ability to come or go, no trade, and no supplies. Imagine being trapped inside your own community, starving, with guards blocking every exit. These villages became death traps. Between 1932 and 1933, around 4 million Ukrainians died. Some historians say the numbers were likely even higher, up to 7 to 10 million. There are no exact numbers because the Soviet government destroyed any and all evidence. They changed records and punished anyone who verbally tried to share the truth. But just because there were no records, that didn't mean that there were no memories of these atrocities. You can eliminate paper, but you can never eliminate the trauma burned into millions of people's minds. Eventually, once the threat was no longer looming, Ukrainians slowly began sharing their truths. Yes, many perished during the Holodomor, but those who survived made sure the world eventually knew what happened. Now, before I continue, I want to warn you that what you are about to hear is horrific, so please proceed with caution. What did life actually look like during the Holodomor, especially for kids and teenagers? It was pure hell on earth. people did whatever they could to survive. They boiled grass, leaves, and tree bark as an attempt to nourish the body in some way, but it didn't help. Children fainted from hunger in school until schools eventually just shut down entirely. Teenagers took every last bit of strength they had and walked to the train stations to try to escape, but Soviet guards often blocked them from leaving, then beat them for trying. Their bodies were left on the sides of the road to die. Parents skipped meals so their children could eat, until the parents themselves died of starvation, leaving children completely alone. Entire families disappeared within weeks. Some families were even forced to eat their deceased relatives because it was the only chance they had to survive. Imagine being 13, 14, 15 years old and having to decide between dying in your village, eating your sibling, or taking a chance and attempting to run away to an entirely new country alone. That is, if the Soviet guards don't catch you first. This was the reality for thousands of young people in Ukraine. Stalin didn't just want Ukrainians to starve. No, he wanted Ukraine to stop existing as a nation. He wanted to wipe the earth clean of all things Ukrainian. During the time to the Holodomor, the Soviet regime also banned the Ukrainian language from being spoken, arrested Ukrainian writers, poets, and teachers. They executed community leaders, replaced Ukrainian officials with Russians, and destroyed churches and cultural institutions. This wasn't just about hunger. This was an attack on Ukrainian identity as a whole, on culture, on memory, on the future of a people. That's why it's important for the Holodomor to be recognized as a genocide, even today, especially today. The Soviet Union denied the Holodomor for decades. Shocking, I know. They told the world there was no famine. It's Western propaganda. Everyone had enough food, they're exaggerating. Meanwhile, foreign journalists who tried to report the truth were blocked, threatened, forced to write lies, and in some cases disappeared under mysterious circumstances without a trace. Sound familiar? It should. It's a Soviet tale as old as time. Survivors were terrified to share their stories. Some didn't even tell their own children until many years later, long after the danger had passed. This is why we must honor them now and continue to share their stories with the world. Understanding the Holodomor isn't just about learning history. It's about recognizing patterns, because when one nation tries to erase another, whether through starvation, violence, or misinformation, we as human beings have a responsibility to speak out against it. When we look the other way, history tends to repeat itself, which it has. The Holodomor shows the world what happens when truth is buried, when suffering is ignored, and when people are dehumanized. But remembering it, honoring it, is a way to say, we see you, we hear you, we won't let your story disappear. Every year, Ukrainians around the world light a candle on the fourth Saturday of November to remember the millions of lives lost, not as a symbol of tragedy, but as a promise. A promise that their story will continue and that Ukraine lives on. We cannot and will not be broken. Slava Ukraini!